Hello again. In part 1 of this video, I provided the materials you need to get started with the conversation course, and I presented the main ideas. In this second part, I'll explain how to continue with your conversation course. After that, I'll deal with the other things you need to know. So, what's in this part? First, how to continue your course. Second, tips on classroom management and the role of the staff teacher. Third, what you need to know about behaviour. Fourth, whether you need qualifications such as TEFL. Fifth, how to find work. Sixth, how much work you can hope to get and when you get paid. Seventh, how much freedom you'll get to run your lessons the way you want. Eighth, why AI is not your friend as a conversation teacher. Finally, I'll conclude part 2 by explaining why I think the method I presented in part 1 is the best way of running a conversation class. So let's get started. In your first lesson, you showed your students that your conversation class is something special, not just a boring chat about weather, holidays and pets. Now we have to maintain the same standard, keeping them interested and involved. Top tip: variety is important. As your first lesson was based on fiction, the second one should be related to the real world. But remember those 4 key concepts. The students need a clear challenge. The students must understand the situation before the discussion starts. The students should do the talking, not the teacher. And the students should work in pairs, one weak, one strong, so that the weaker students are fully involved. There are plenty of options for real-world topics. Here's an example that worked well with my students. There is a real possibility that life will be discovered in other parts of our solar system. Both NASA and the European Space Agency are making a big effort to find it. Tell your students to look at the websites for NASA and ESA and to pay special attention to the oceans under the icy surface of Europa and Ganymede, moons of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, as well as the underground water on Mars and the dense clouds above the surface of Venus. In this lesson, your students are astronauts. Give each pair a destination. Tell them to imagine their journey based on their research and present it in their next lesson. They'll learn a lot and they'll use their creativity together with the English they know. Next lesson, go back to fiction but with a different slant. This time, think of a film that you know well, one that the students can easily find, not necessarily in English. Their own language is okay for the first part of this activity. All the students should watch the same film as pre-lesson homework. Tell them that a key event in the story has changed. You decide what this big change is. Their task is to reimagine the end of the story in the light of this change. Each pair should present their version in the next lesson in English. Here's an example. I work in Italy, so I would choose a brilliant film called C'è ancora domani, There's Still Tomorrow. The plot leads you to think, incorrectly, that the mother is about to abandon her nice kids and her disgusting husband and go off with her ex-boyfriend. If she had, how would the end be different? That's the task. Each pair should present their version in the next lesson, in English. This idea can work for most films. Let me explain why it's okay to use a film in their language. In most classes, it is unrealistic to expect students to, at the beginning of high school, to understand a film made for English native tongue people. Of course, there are exceptional classes and students, but in general, the listening materials you use should be only slightly above their comfortable comprehension range, not miles above it. After this, your next lesson should go back to the real world with a different topic. There are endless possibilities, but here's a suggestion. Organize the class as a debate in which each pair has to research and then present a different aspects of the subject. You could choose any topic that's being discussed on the news or on social media. If they like the space lesson, you could follow on from that. This time the question is, how did life get started on Earth? There's lots about this on the internet. Here's how to organize it. One group looks into the theory that life evolved at the bottom of the ocean in hot water gushing up through gaps between tectonic plates. Another group looks into the argument that essential amino acids arrived from space on meteorites. Another pair looks at the idea that life will evolve spontaneously if these four factors are present: energy, water, certain minerals, and long periods of time. Each group does its research and then presents its arguments in English. The same general approach will work for many subjects. Now let's look at classroom management. In my area, a staff teacher employed by the school has to be present whenever an external teacher is teaching. That makes classroom management easier for you, the external teacher. Check whether this rule also applies in the country where you want to live. Here are some basics about classroom management. The key factor is your relationship with the class. If the students enjoy your lessons, if you give them useful practice, if you are fair-minded, most students will want to participate, but don't expect angels. Bad behaviour is disruptive and annoying, but sometimes it's also instructive. When I started teaching, bad behaviour prompted me to make my lessons more involving. Next point, if you shout, you will lose the respect of the class. Just keep calm and wait. You'll hear a lot of grumbles in the teacher's room about discipline, but the truth is that every teacher sometimes gets landed with a difficult class. That's part of the job. Just do the best you can. Fourth topic, what qualifications do you need? Each country has different requirements, but the information is easy to find. Just do an AI search. For example, if you type in the question, do high schools in France hire English native speakers for English conversation courses, you'll get a very detailed answer. Now a related issue. Do you need a teaching certificate? In some countries, you can't do any kind of English teaching without a 120-hour TEFL certificate or similar. Even if it's not compulsory in the country you've chosen, it helps you to get work and it makes your CV more impressive. In Italy, the qualifications are often more flexible if you are just doing conversation courses, especially if the school can't find a native tongue teacher. Personally, I did the Cambridge CELTA, CELTIL and Delta courses, but that was after I had been teaching for several years. The courses were well organised, but the main focus was on language teaching, not on conversation. Fifth topic, how to find work. Once you've decided where you want to live, get a list of schools in that area, usually available on internet. Phone a school and ask to speak to the head English teacher. Ask the teacher if you can meet her. Even if it doesn't lead to work in that school, the teacher may be able to point you in the right direction. Just leaving your CV with the school administration won't work. You always need to speak to someone, even if only to find out when and if the school chooses external teachers. In Italy, there is normally an online bando, meaning a competitive application process. It's important to discover when this will be placed on the school website, because there is always a deadline for submitting your application. This involves completing some forms and adding your CV with the supporting documents or certificates. Sixth subject, how much work can you hope to get? Be prepared for a slow start and make sure you can afford to wait. Hopefully, demand for your services will pick up as you get known. If you do a good job, your clients will come back for more. I had many years with 20 hours a week in state schools in the mornings, followed by lessons in my own small private school in the evenings. When do you get paid? In my experience, state schools always pay at the end of each contract, and there are no interim payments. Each contract lasts 3 or 4 months, or sometimes a whole school year. To cope with this delay, you'll need private students or a second job or savings. On the other hand, all the state schools I worked for paid in full and usually promptly. Seventh topic, how much freedom do you get? Every school accepted my proposals as regards course content, with one exception, a head teacher who wanted something more traditional. Even in that case, I still ran every lesson independently, I did all my own preparation, and I created most of my materials myself. Of course, I can't promise that your school will give you that much freedom. Eighth topic, why AI complicates your life as a conversation teacher. Before AI, I would give my students a few days to think up a solution to the challenge. After AI arrived, I found that some students were using a chatbot to do the thinking for them. Why was that a problem? Because they were not using their creativity. So what can we do about it? This idea works well. When your students are presenting their solutions, write down any phrases that sound suspiciously good. Chatbots often use idioms that low-level students couldn't know. Next, ask them what these phrases mean. If they can't explain, challenge them. If they get caught out once, they won't do it again. Here's another idea. Set an example by not using AI yourself in the materials you create. The 3 videos I mentioned in part 1 have no AI content. Final topic. Why do I think that the method I described in part 1 is the best way of running a conversation course? The reason is very simple. All the other methods I tried had the same serious fault. They privileged the gifted students and did little to help the weak ones. A conversation course is worthless if the best students do all the speaking. It's the teacher's job to get the weaker ones fully involved. In conclusion, good luck. I hope teaching works for you and for your students. If you do the job seriously, I'm sure it will.